Hello, everyone. Today, my name is Manuel Montoya. I'm a professor at the Anderson School of Management, and I am a Daniels Fund Fellow. And today we're going to have a conversation with two coordinators of what we're calling the Digital Economies program, Erika Selesky and Amber Autry. Hi, Erika and Amber.
Hi.
Uh, we're doing a project related to the Daniels Fund entitled Trust in a Digital Economy. And we're trying to explore some of the various ways in which we can understand how we build trust towards a viable and resilient digital economy. One of the exercises that we're going to use to do that is referred to as a Terra Prime system. It's a learning system that I developed over the past year and a half. It's a conversation starter, and it basically is an exploration of complex subjects and issues using a series of decks that have been drawn from a number of elements of humanistic inquiry, everything from post-structuralist philosophy to ethics, to literary studies and cultural criticism. These are all cards that help us layer and understand the various complexities of a complex subject like the one we're going to discuss today. Before I get started showing the deck, I'm just cruising through the deck here for your perusal. I want Erika and Amber just to introduce themselves briefly and how they came to this particular project. Erika, let's start with you.
All right. So my name is Erika Selesky. I am a graduate student at the Anderson School of Management, and I came into the Digital Economies project kind of as a subset of a project we had worked on last semester with using online tools and what's the term I'm looking for? We used a virtual reality simulation type of resource called Second Life, where we were intending on hosting an interactive experience for people to go through. And we're planning on doing that again as well with the Digital Economies project. But because of that, it got me more interested in digital society and how we can move into digital economies. We also discussed at some point Estonia and how Estonia has become a primarily digital economy. And so with those previous discussions, I became interested in this project, and that's how I got here.
Hey, thanks, Erika. How about you, Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber Autry. I'm an undergraduate student at Anderson. And how I came into the Digital Economies project was through a student organization called IBSG. And the person who recruited me talked about like how we would have various conversations about, digital, how the digital world affects business and society, and that was what really got me interested. And he told me about like how they were planning a digitally focused project based around Estonia, which unfortunately never really ended up happening due to world events. Um, which and then Dr. Martero proposed the Relic project idea, which was similar but done entirely digitally, and I joined in because I thought that was, a really interesting way to, I guess, execute this idea of how deeply intertwined digital society and physical society have become. And again, much unfortunately, that project kind of didn't really follow through, but it kind of became a different project to the Digital Economies project, which I guess to me personally, I feel is a successor to the Relic project. And I think with this one, we're going to kind of focus more on how a digital economy could come about and how that could affect society in the long run.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. And it has been a rocky road.
Yeah.
Everything from being physically unable to travel to some of the places we wanted to explore and expose students to, but also these larger questions have been about the reliability of the digital infrastructure that we have here, and and some of the other challenges associated with
Hmm.
being in the time of COVID. For everybody who's going to be watching this, just wanted to note that the theme this year for the Daniels Fund, which who has funded and supported this element of the project and is supporting for this year the Second Life space that we've developed, and that will be, and this will be embedded inside of the Second Life space. So if you're seeing it on Second Life, hi. But it was, the theme is trust. And it's one of the Daniels Fund principles. And we decided that we wanted to explore broadly what this concept of trust means, both as a moral and ethical concept, but also as a social, cultural, and political concept. And also just as a prompt to understand how we build trust in a digital economy, and how do we build towards a trustworthy and resilient digital economy. So having said that, the system is fairly simple. There are 27 cards in the deck, and the three of us are going to take turns talking about a fundamental question. And that question is going to be, how do we build trust in a digital economy? And I'll start typing in the chat bar. So we're not switching through too many screens. I think that might be the most effective way for us to archive what we're doing here. And then I'll transpose them into some notes later on. But basically, we're going to take turns. To get started, I will start just to kind of warm things up. I want to talk a little bit about the alien gaze card. Now, this card is used to think about how our behavior changes when we know someone is watching us. So the idea is based off of some work that I do with an organization that works closely with SETI and with the Very Large Array here in New Mexico. It's actually, her name is Sherry. She runs the Intergalactic Council of Intergalactic Relations. And she's always thinking about how human beings create this kind of unified societal discourse about how we relate to the concept of an alien other. If somebody else in the world, in the universe is out there and they're watching us, how does our behavior change? And what does that do to our politics and to our social belonging to the world? And it's a very interesting thing to explore. But for me, I was also thinking about the digital infrastructure related to a digital economy. The majority of it is reliant upon our occupation of space as in terms of satellites and in terms of the telecommunications network that's required to build a resilient digital infrastructure. And once we have that established, or as we evolve in establishing that digital infrastructure, there does become a quote unquote alien other that does circulate around the planet, that is watching us and that is actually able to not only surveil us, but is just gazing at us. And so this idea that our digital infrastructure is gazing back at us is actually quite interesting to me. And I wanted to start the conversation first by saying, I think that one of the things that happens when we build trust is we have to become comfortable with the people, places, and things that may or may not be looking at us. And I know for myself in society, particularly in the time of COVID, when you see somebody, for example, not wearing a mask, or when you see somebody kind of staring at you, or maybe even getting a little too close in your own way in which you view social distance, it's clear that in society, the way that we gaze at each other has actually changed. And a digital infrastructure adds another dimension to that. So I wanted to add that thought and contribute that perspective on how we're building trust. If we're going to build trust in a digital economy, we're going to have a serious conversation about the politics of the satellite networks and the types of implications that occur when we have a digital infrastructure that can actually monitor us. A very practical way in which I think about this is cookies. So this whole data mining and data gathering sort of thing. Once you're in a digital society, you're being profiled, and you're actually then an entire digital profile is being created in relation to your consumer habits, your use on the internet, your use of digital technologies. And this is something that then ultimately either reinforces our perceptions of how a digital economy is structured, who's in charge, who benefits from that, but it's also about who's watching me at any given moment in time, and how we develop some sort of cultural value around systems of privacy and laws, rules, and regulations that will be evolving over time to address that. Do you guys have any thoughts related to this card as I've described that this dimension of trust in a digital economy?
I'm glad you brought up the idea about data mining, because I know a lot of people are very on edge about that sort of thing, because people feel like they can't trust the government because they feel the government is always watching them, or massive corporations are always watching them, so they feel like, their activities on the internet are always under someone's eye, and nobody really seems to be a fan of that. People don't like being watched. People like their privacy. And when you have that privacy violated, that completely will break somebody's trust in you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I have a thought, but I want to see what Erika thinks about this as well.
Building off that, I think even before we breach into the world of digital society and digital economies, we already live in a time with data mining and big data where profiles are already being built around our consumption of the internet and what we're doing online. Big corporations and the government and whatnot are already tracking what we're doing online. And as a result, because of people's desire for privacy, we've seen things like VPNs, virtual private networks, and other types of browser extensions that have come up as options for privacy, for people to reestablish that privacy that they feel like they've lost, encrypt their data, protect them from even their internet service providers being able to see what it is that they're doing. And I think this also kind of gets us into the net neutrality issue in terms of, with ISPs, your internet service providers, being able to throttle your internet connection or not based on how much they simply want to charge you. And that gets into more issues with being watched and distrust in the companies that are providing us the services, as well as the government that's allowing them to do it. And so I think with that, we have to have a conversation about how much do we value privacy, and what's the trade-off in terms of our digital profiles in a digital economy, and what is attached to us online, but also what can the government see, when can they see it, what rules and regulations is there in terms of us giving them the permission to see it, as well as should companies be allowed to monitor what we do online in order to sell us a product? And if so, what is the rules and regulations in terms of our permissions for that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. To build off what both of you have said, I mean, there's the other side of the coin, right? In a way, we've already developed in our own, cultural values and our social systems, a sense of, either embracing being watched, or creating our own system of values around privacy. I mean, I think about Instagram culture, and I think about an entire generation of people who have been basically brought into the world thinking about their lives as being open to the public,
Mm-hmm.
and being socially available. So we have, beyond Instagram culture and other forms of social media, I mean, this is a perspective where not only are we now, if the gaze changes us, it has already transformed us in that way, because part of what we do in society, we've already kind of become used to the idea that somebody is watching us. So we even change the way we pose for pictures.
Mm-hmm.
We change the way that we present ourselves publicly. There has been ongoing discussions now about how one even kind of adequately creates an environment in your home space during Zoom. And like, what do you represent and what do you share with other people? And some people share a lot, some people share very little. So there already is this gaze from space, quote unquote, a digital space or otherwise, that is actually coming to bear on us. And I actually think that it's politicized now. In terms of in the United States context, it's politicized because we now have a space force. We have a military apparatus that is actually now part of their duties, which was part of the Air Force. The domain of the Air Force is cyberspace. So there is already kind of this discussion about how one monitors and actually produces a gaze, both even from a political way, but it's also militarized itself while it's popularized itself. So I find that to be a very, very interesting dimension of how we're building trust. I want to move into another card. So I'm going to invite either one of you to propose another card to talk about.
Um,
If I could propose one. I don't remember what the title of the card is, but it's the one about children.
Yep.
The child
Oh,
card or
yes.
something like that.
The Child Devourer, yeah.
The Child Devourer, that one.
Yep.
So what I think about the Child Devourer and with digital economies and what we're seeing already with online is kids are growing up with the internet. Kids are already using the internet. A lot of them are not necessarily using it safely. We don't have as much focus on internet safety as we did when the internet was first coming about. At least that's my perception of it. And with a digital economy, we have to get into the conversation of how do we view children in society? Are children their own citizens? Are children responsible for themselves, or are they under someone else's responsibility? Are they under someone else's care? How do we manage that in a digital space? So, for example, if they're given their own profile online with not only just basic information, but sensitive information, right? Like a social security number, all sorts of other things online. What do we do to protect children so that their sensitive information isn't leaked and that they are protected from dangers on the internet that we know exist? For example, we know that there are predators on the internet that will pursue children. We know that with certain issues, going back into privacy, a lot of the time, if children have social media accounts, they're not as aware or conscious of what it is that they're posting. So they may post something, a picture that includes their address, a picture that includes something that's a sensitive information that links, that can put them in a dangerous situation. So how do we better protect children in a digital society, in a digital economy, especially if they're more directly linked with sensitive information?
Yeah, that's a great point. Amber, do you have any thoughts on this?
You honestly brought up a really excellent point with how children have much easier access to the internet nowadays, and they have more freedom on what they can and can't post nowadays. Because when I was a kid, there was a lot more focus on internet safety and, don't post your address, don't post your real name, stuff like that. And nowadays, like, people are just blatantly giving that information out. And I find it really interesting that a lot of these talks about internet safety have kind of fallen by the wayside as the internet has become more important to our lives. And I do kind of wonder if there's a particular reason for that, if this is something that was done on purpose or if this is just something we've forgotten about.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what both of you are getting at also for me is the acceleration of digital citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
We get indoctrinated into a digital society much quicker than we do into, for example, any other type of bureaucratic system. Like you have to wait till the age of 16 to drive a car. You have to wait till the age of 18 to vote, 21 to drink alcohol. But there really is no limit. It becomes fundamentally like it's almost instantaneous how somebody kind of appears in a digital society. And I think we do need to think about some of those elements of how we deal with children as citizens inside of that, because they are, I mean, if we're thinking about them as proto-citizens, what kind of work is being done the word may be incorrect, but to acculturate. I was going to say indoctrinate, which is a very interesting distinction, right? But to introduce somebody into a society without it being spontaneous and all of the dangers that are associated with that. So it's a great use of this card. Any other thoughts on this one, or do we want to move to another card?
Um, I don't really have anything else to say. I don't know about you, Erica.
I think we can move to another one. I think I covered what I wanted to discuss with this one.
Awesome. Amber, you're up then.
Okay, I don't know if I can play 2 cards,
Sure.
but I'm gonna play, let's see, let me pull it up. I'm gonna play both the zombie card and the the false face society card, because I both think they're kind of intertwined with each other, especially in this world where we're dealing with COVID and the aftermath of COVID.
Great.
So, so I guess to kind of relate this to current world events, the reason I brought the zombie card up is because that I feel that COVID has accelerated the speed at which we embrace digital technology much further than it was before, because of the fact that we couldn't really meet face to face for, a year, and it was very hard to organize large events without, getting in trouble or without the risk of infecting people with COVID. So, and another interesting thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people and have lost their trust in the government because of how, COVID was handled, and, how the government responded to it. And a lot of people feel that, the government didn't do enough, or people feel like the government is doing too much. So there's this kind of unequal balance of trust from the citizens. And to kind of add to that, the false face society card kind of again intertwines with this, in the sense that we always put on our faces. Excuse me, I apologize for the noise.
That's quite all right. Don't ever apologize for that in the time of COVID.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird time. But to bring that up, sorry, let me get my thoughts recentered. In this time of COVID, we often put up on these, false faces over the internet. For example, I think one of you brought up earlier that we often present like our Zoom backgrounds in a much more presentable way than it would normally be in real life. For instance, we'll tidy up, we'll, kind of dust a little bit, and then we'll put on nicer clothes or kind of look nicer so we look nicer on camera. And I feel this is something that's gotten worse in COVID, that we're kind of starting to get used to the idea of constantly putting on these false faces, either on social media, over Zoom, in class, in meetings, that, there's this kind of like break within ourselves of, who's the real me and who's the person I present to the world. And to kind of counter that as well, I feel that COVID has also really brought out a lot of people's true faces, because I've noticed that a lot of people have definitely put on faces in regards to how they treat others, especially in this time. And this goes in both a positive and negative way. I've noticed that some people have hourly become more positive and helpful towards others, and willing to, take steps in order to help others, whereas other people have taken steps back and kind of realized that and basically told the world, I don't care about you, I don't care about your problems, or, what you're going through. And I feel like this is something that's going to be important for a digital economy, in the sense that, in order to build trust, you kind of have to gauge people's true intentions, and that's difficult when everybody's putting on a face. So it kind of brings up the question of, as digital life becomes more intertwined with physical life, how much will we truly be ourselves at the end of it all?
That's fascinating. I have a couple of thoughts, but I saw Erika, you lit up there for a couple of moments there. What are your thoughts on this?
So I have several thoughts. To start with the zombie card, going back to that with how COVID has impacted trust as well, I think, and trust in digital spaces. I think COVID has brought about a lot of not just distrust in the government, but also distrust in others and distrust on information that we find online. There's a lot of
Yes.
misinformation that's being spread around online right now. And a lot of
Mhm.
people who are not trusting of the government or who are not trusting of what is being projected to us by scientists are turning to these sources of misinformation. We see a lot of, even still a year into the pandemic, there's still a lot of COVID is a
Yeah.
hoax, COVID's not real, COVID's not as serious as people are telling us it is. Or we get people who are not wanting to take the vaccine because they don't trust what's in the vaccine. I saw recently someone had mentioned in a video that they had no one is telling us what's in the vaccine, so I don't trust it. What's the political agenda behind the vaccine? So we're seeing this distrust not only in the government, having people turn to the internet and digital spaces to find alternatives, alternative information, alternative misinformation to make themselves feel more comforted while they are continuing to distrust the government. But we're also seeing how that can negatively have an impact on society as a whole. Because people are distrustful of the government and they don't believe COVID or they don't want to trust the vaccine or whatever, that does have a negative impact on other people because it is a virus and it is something that if you are not taking the steps to not only protect yourself, but to protect others around you, not only is it possible that you will fall sick, but you could be an asymptomatic carrier that gets someone else sick and harms them. So I think that's an interesting thing with the zombie card. And with the false face society, I want to talk about it in the context of toxic charity and ally-based work and this kind of idea of the faces and the masks that we wear online. With a lot of stuff this past year, we've seen a lot of socio-political unrest, right? Partially due to COVID, partially due to other reasons. And with that, we've seen a lot of internet activism. We've seen a lot of people online discussing, we've seen the rise of Instagram infographics, for example. People constantly post little infographics to their stories. And that brings into the question, is this really ally-based work? And is there really trust in this kind of thing? Because we've also seen a backlash to the Instagram infographics. A lot of people are saying, you know, you're not done just because you posted something on Instagram. That's not all of the work that you need to do. And it gets into, well, why are people posting these things on Instagram? Is it because they genuinely believe something or because they want to portray an idea of what they believe to their followers, to whoever it is that they have online? And I think that gets into a sense of distrust in the sense of, well, now we're not trusting our friends or the people that we follow online because we're wondering the power dynamic within their activism, if they're portraying activism or not. We're wondering about if they're actually doing something or if they're just saying something to say something and look good.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I mean, I was thinking about the physicality of what nonprofits do. I had a conversation with a director of a nonprofit recently, and you know, one of the challenges has been how do you get people, especially in organizations that are based on volunteers, to actually, what does it actually mean to serve a community when you have a digital interface? And that's the other side of it, is that, you know, part of that is there's a desire on the part of the person who is actually quote unquote serving to get some sort of satisfaction from that. And that is actually the way we incentivize volunteers in society. But in a digital space, that's not necessarily the same dynamic. And it leads to other terms that we now have that are socially viable, right? We can ghost people immediately. And we no longer have to feel obligated to people in a sense. When we had those kinds of relationships with people, it's much more difficult for those sorts of relationships to be severed in a way that we can just basically just cut somebody off. And even if we said we were going to help them, we're still navigating this new space in such a way that, in a way, the way that we sever ties and the ways that we build meaningful, authentic relationships online when we want to serve a particular issue, particularly when it deals with a group of vulnerable populations, it's an entirely different dynamic. And not only are we dealing with trust in the digital economy, what we're talking about in this card is we're talking about betrayal in a digital economy. And I think that the concept of betrayal in a digital context is something that we're going to have to, that opens up another can of worms about how people experience and how we're traumatized by things, and how we then kind of repair relationships when these new frontiers of betrayal have taken place in a digital society. I will say one thing about the zombie card. It also strikes me, one of the reasons I love the zombie card, and the reason it was actually one of the first cards I ever used in the deck, was because every major civil society has a zombie myth in it. Since, whether it be called, we don't have to call it a zombie myth, we can call it a contagion myth. But even in the United States, when we first started this country, stories like Charles Brockden Brown's Ormond, which was a character who could turn himself into the plague, and he could cross through walls, and there was all sorts of like really interesting like issues about privacy and about stalking and power and class and race. There's all sorts of stuff going on in that. But whenever these sorts of things happen, you question whether or not these institutions are viable. That's why we have all of these post-apocalyptic stories about zombies. They're fantasies about what happens when you move into this next phase, when the institutions we have no longer work. And I wonder whether or not there is, analogously, I think that there are plagues in a digital space. We have viruses, we have Trojan horses, we have all sorts of different ways in which digital spaces actually can create a contagion. And I wonder also whether or not we paid enough attention to how those have destabilized social and cultural spheres inside of a digital space, to the point where it actually acts like COVID has revealed for us in the way that you guys have described. Okay, we could go on forever. I want to be mindful of, I want people to be exposed to this conversation, but I don't think we need to evoke a 3 or 4 hour conversation about this to make this an exciting one. How about we do one more round? Maybe not in a back and forth sort of way, but we present a couple of other cards that we're thinking about as a way of closing up this kind of entry point into discussing and using the Terra Prime system to discuss trust in a digital economy. Amber or Erika, I take volunteers.
I mean, one thing I think we could discuss is like the Black Swan card, and with, tangible versus intangible value. If things all become digitized, do handmade products become more or less valued in our society? And do people trust digitally made products or things that are produced by a digital society or a digital system over things that are produced by humans?
I actually do want to interject now. Now I'm cheating, because I want to say something about that, because we have some colleagues that if you're exploring this on Second Life, who really believe that, very much value that there's craft elements in a digital economy. The space inside of Second Life that was created, it was done with care. It was quote unquote handmade, and there is an aura to it because of the way that it was designed. So I think you're touching onto something really powerful there. Amber, any thoughts on that? Since I opened up that Pandora's box.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good conversation, because, what is like the definition of handmade digitally? Like, can something that can be created digitally technically be considered handmade? And then you kind of get into these like, different definitions of, what is or isn't handmade and all that. Sorry, it's just, I don't know, it's just like an interesting conversation to have because you kind of have people on the internet saying that like digital art isn't as valuable as physical art because you can create with a computer when in reality like it takes a lot of the same principles and techniques to create a digital piece of art than and physical art. You know, they both are the same but created in different mediums.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think we could go down this rabbit hole forever. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Maybe they do, and and I think there's an element of that in this. We're building ritual and tradition in a digital space. I mean, for goodness sakes, I mean, Zoom calls are ubiquitous, right? There are all sorts of other ways in which we're used to now. The person who is mute and talking, and you're like you're muted, and all these other ways in which we now kind of become accustomed to and habituate a digital space. But then when it extends into the world of art, my goodness, I mean, art is one of the ways in which we create meaning in society, and one of the fundamental ways in which we build trust in one another, and we have a shared meaning in the world. So there has to be room to discuss this further, although not now because we're moving into another round. So Amber, you're up, and then I might have one at the end to close up.
All right, there's like a few cards I want to bring up, but I'm just kind of like thinking about like, you know, how could we like bring this up honestly? Um, I'm gonna go with the Kawaii card. You know, how is this? Um, how? Okay. Um, how have like cute or comforting things like helped us in this time of COVID? How has it like helped foster like, trust among other people? Does like the creation of cute things, help bring people together or maybe bring more awareness to more uncomfortable ideas? I think is probably what I want to say. And I feel that, again, COVID has really, exacerbated how people truly feel about each other. And I feel like a lot of people kind of have like reverted to like this more, I don't want to say childish, but like kind of chasing nostalgia mindset where we long for better days and days when things were a lot simpler and we didn't have to deal with the pandemic. And again, I feel like this ties into um the quiet card because people often use like these cute characters and comfort characters and all these other not cutesy ideas but more cutesified ideas that help bring comfort to themselves in a time of uncertainty and lack of trust.
Love that. That's really that's really great. Yeah, Erica, what are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts are both, or that, cuteness can be used both as something that is disarming and something that is defensive, right? You use cuteness as something that can be seen as inviting, right? That's why, drawing on, since kawaii is a Japanese term, drawing on Japan, they have cute mascots everywhere to kind of incentivize people buying things, visiting places, what have you, right? So it's a disarming type of mechanism in that sense. But at the same time, a lot of people can use cute things, like as Amber said, with comfort characters and whatnot, as a defense mechanism. They use cute things as a symbol of um, distraction or levity. And with that, can cuteness be abused by systems that are trying to gain our trust, like governments, institutions, businesses?
Um, oh,
Yes, please, Amber.
yeah,
No,
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to quickly add on to what Erica mentioned about like how like Japan has these mascots for all kinds of places, and I've kind of noticed that also during COVID, there's been a lot of these like advertisements that have this more quote unquote comforting feel to them as a way to kind of, I guess, ease the consumer's mind about what's going on right now. Like, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these ads, they're like, oh, we're taking steps to, prevent COVID, like, well, we care about our employees, and, advertisements like that. And I feel like that kind of ties into the idea of, like, I guess, disarming the threat and kind of like presenting themselves as, oh, this corporation's, just like you, and, we're kind of struggling too. We're trying to help you as well. So I feel that, um, I guess advertising has definitely changed in that sense, because it's much easier to get somebody to buy something when you pretend to be their friend, or when you have like a cutesy mascot. Like, why do you think, like, mascots exist? They're there to get you to buy something.
Yeah, or to even to buy into an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, you think about the onset of the creation of the internet and what was consumed, and it's not a popular thing to say, but the majority of consumption was either pornography or cute kittens. So it was like two ends of a very extreme, two extremes on the spectrum, right? Of like what we call cute, right? There's kind of this visceral kind of element of it, but on the other side, I mean, it's still like you can see the number one things on YouTube that are viewed. I mean, are cute puppies and kittens and teacups, and I mean that sort of stuff is consumed regularly, and it has to be into these things that you're talking about, how we're growing in very much into this new world and this new infrastructure as children. And we actually, I think there's a way in which I said earlier that we accelerated the way that we become digital. We almost mature instantaneously, but at the same time, we also retain a lot of the innocence and a lot of the nostalgia for being in kind of an innocent state inside of the digital infrastructure in a very different way. And dealing with that is going to actually be a very important way in which we create moral systems of trust in a digital infrastructure. That I'm glad you chose that one. That's a really, really powerful card. I was actually going to close with a gyroscope card, and I was going to just make the observation that what I've found also in this time of COVID, but also just generally when we talk about digital infrastructure, is the level of convenience that's provided by being able to have these conversations without having to kind of move bodies, human beings, from meeting to meeting, from place to place. Commutes have been eliminated for many people in this work environment. Not everyone, but what it has done is it's raised the question of what's the value of taking your time with things. And digital infrastructure both accelerates things very quickly, but it also slows things down quite a bit. And you now have an opportunity to do a lot of things that then give you time to go outside for a walk. Or I often wonder, like, I heard a presentation 2 years ago from a philosopher, and the title of his presentation was "In Defense of Laziness." And I loved it. It was one of my favorite presentations that I've heard academically in such a long time, because in a way, the way that he was using laziness and the concept of boredom was not as kind of a lack of moral virtue, but actually a way of defending the space you need to be able to process, to digest, and to take time with things. And I think if we're going to have a society that builds trust in one another, we're going to have to learn and acknowledge the fact that sometimes we speed things up, but sometimes we have to slow it down so that we have these kinds of conversations and meaning building processes with each other. Any thoughts on that as we close up?
So,
Yeah.
go ahead, Erika.
Oh, you can go
Oh,
first,
no, you
Amber.
go ahead.
Okay, if you're sure. So my thoughts on this are, it kind of comes into this idea of this kind of hustle culture that we see online with people who are talking about how they need to always be busy, always be working on something that will help them on their way to success, always be working, always be, commodify your hobbies, make your hobbies into something that you can sell on the internet, make your hobbies, don't take a moment to rest. And I think that has become a harmful thing. Going off on your in defense of laziness point, Dr. Montoya, where people aren't taking breaks as much, where people aren't creating boundaries between work, school life, professional life, personal life. People aren't creating those boundaries anymore. And it kind of can be not only harmful, but it can create, I would say, a potential for, what's the word I'm looking for people to take advantage of that, for people to take advantage of people who are working themselves too thin, or for people who are stressing themselves out because of this need to be productive, where companies or whatnot will try to sell you things that will make you more productive, or how to be more productive, when what the truth is, you really just need to take a break. And I think that that kind of COVID has exacerbated that, in the sense of, with a lot of people who are not leaving their homes, it's harder to distinguish those boundaries between your personal life, your professional life. Because if you're at home and you're working from home, or you're doing schoolwork from home, or what have you, it's a lot more difficult to think, okay, this is the time for work, and then this is the time where I'm at home, and this is the time where I'm decompressing and relaxing, because that space has also become the space where you're doing everything. So it's harder to have that distinction, and I think it's harder to maintain that kind of trust in others, because you're constantly putting this kind of pressure on yourself, and so you don't have the time to trust others.
Well said. Well said.
So I'm actually really glad you brought up the idea of, like, hustle culture, and how society often pushes us to either not working, either constantly working, and if you're not working, you're lazy, because there's this demonization of the idea of, just at least in American culture, there's this demonization of the idea that of you know relaxing and not doing as much work. And if you're not following the rat race, then you're lazy, and you're not going to succeed, and all this other stuff. And I feel that this is something that's, like, often pressed onto us, especially in school, where either um either you're working all the time, or you're not working at all. And um let me think. And I guess, and interestingly, it's been countered and recently with kind of like the introduction of ideas like mindfulness and meditation, and people kind of encouraging us to kind of like, hey, it's okay to take a break, and it's okay to kind of just sit there in quiet stillness for like 5 minutes. It's fine to take a break, and I guess the popularization of this idea of self-care, and this is something I've noticed personally that's gotten more popular over the past several years, is this idea where companies are more interested in selling the idea of self-care and how it can help us, instead of, as well as selling the idea of, have to always be working at the same time. And that's kind of like this very interesting dichotomy, that on one hand, you're being sold this idea of, hey, you need to take time out for yourself, but at the same time, you also need to be working yourself to death.
Wow. On that note, I mean, I just want to take a moment to thank you guys. I mean, I know we've had some bumps in trying to get this project started, but the fact that when you break it all down and you just have the ability to tear everything away and have a meaningful conversation with each other, there's limitless possibilities in how we can grow. And I think that's the one thing that I want to impress upon everybody who's kind of had a window into this conversation. If you're viewing this, one of the things that I would suggest is that trust. I would propose that trust is also about meaning, authenticity, and engagement with one another, and that doesn't occur without kind of the will to be able to kind of do that, despite some of the other obstacles that are provided being on the internet and not being able to have interpersonal relationships and conversations in person.